Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Megan.
And I'm Sierra. Megan and I are going to be trying to re-enter book 2 once again. We are back with our third book video, I think, right?
We really enjoy watching book-related videos, and we honestly get some of the most personable comments on these videos, even though they don't get
the
as
engagement,
many views.
not necessarily view-wise, but comment-wise, you guys come in when we post the book videos. So
also, I now have a Goodreads account. Sierra has a Goodreads account, so you could search our names. Right now I'm only friends with people I actually know, but if you want to follow me and see what books I'm reading, feel free to do so. We are both doing the 2022 reading challenge, and I'm honestly keeping just as good of a pace as Sierra. Her goal is 40 books and mine was technically only 30, so I could probably up mine, but
you could also just leave it as is and then it'll show you surpassing it, so I think that's fine. But today's video is going to be a January-February book wrap-up, so we're going to be sharing with you guys all the books we've read so far this year.
So the very first book that I read this year was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I actually read this on New Year's Day. I started at 6 o'clock at night and I finished this book by 1 in the morning. I just couldn't put it down. I thought it was I heard really good things about this book before I went ahead and read it, and then I just got sucked in and enjoyed it the entire way through. Are we giving little synopsis stuff?
Yeah, we can.
Summaries. So I would describe this book as this girl and her dad have a house that they have that's kind of their weekend house that they go to, just because her mom dies, and so that's kind of the dad wants to give her this little place to go hang out during the weekend. And so there's a neighbor boy there that she starts growing up with, and they get really close and attached. They both share a love of books, and the more she goes back, the more their relationship develops. And then there's a twist in this book that is pretty interesting. So
yeah, and it also jumps back to it goes back to them as childhood friends, but then also is present day. They're a lot older and they hadn't seen each other in 10 years.
I guess
something.
I skipped that part,
which is important. And so
they had this abrupt meeting that hadn't seen each other in years, and they just come across each other in this coffee shop, and she's just shocked because she was not expecting to see him, and then he's oh my gosh, this is perfect. And then she's holding back and has this current life that she's already tried to start living, and so trying to revisit their old relationship, and you start figuring out what happened in the past.
Yeah. I gave that book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it.
I also gave this book 4 stars.
I read that book at the end of last year, so that's why it's not in my section for this video. First book I read this year, I don't have a physical copy with me, but I read it on my Kindle, and it is To Love Jason Thorne. This book I have mixed feelings about. I gave it 3 stars. I'll give you the premise and then say kind of why I was disappointed without hopefully spoiling anything. But the idea is that this girl has a huge crush on her brother's best friend when they're really little, and something happens. He ends up moving away, and they pretty much don't see each other really ever again. Not ever again, because they do eventually, but they both become adults, and that's kind of when it jumps back to relatively early on in the book. And the girl has become a writer, and her first book that she published is doing really well, and this company wants to make a movie out of her book, and her brother's best friend has grown up to be this really famous actor, and they want to cast him as the lead actor in the movie that's based off of her book. And so my idea when I read the synopsis was oh, they fall in love on the set of the movie, and the plot itself is very, very different from that, so that's kind of where it fell a little bit flat for me.
If you like a fake dating / fake marriage trope, this book has that.
I will say
I kind of was not sure about.
As far as
this, but last year,
spice level of her books, Colleen Hoover is my prime ideal spice level.
This one was next.
This one was a little higher than that. I was fine with it, but
some people maybe wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I will say I did enjoy it. It's pretty lighthearted, it's a fun read. So I gave it 3 stars, but romance is pretty hard.
And it wasn't that deep. There wasn't. It was kind of a surface level book, if that makes sense.
Pretty superficial, but it was fun. Okay,
I'm kind of going out of order just because we have shared books and stuff, but another one of the books that I read this year was To Hate Adam Connor, which is kind of the sequel to...
It's the Love-Hate series.
So Sierra read To Love Jason Thorne, another book by the same author and has some of the same characters, is To Hate Adam Connor. I liked this book more than
I probably will read that. I gave 3 stars to that one, but
and I read it on my iPad, and it was on the Kindle Unlimited thing, so I'm just trying to get my use out of my Kindle Unlimited thing. And I enjoyed the book. I read it relatively quickly. Again, the spice level is higher. I would say it matches the book that Sierra just talked about, but I like this one more. the beginning I was kind of like not sure about this character because the character is the best friend that was in the previous book, and I didn't know how I felt about her in that book. But this one, she actually grows more of a personality, and which is good.
Yeah.
She is living with, like she's between housing because her boyfriend broke up with her and she was living with him. And so now she's living with the person in that book and her husband. And then a new neighbor who's another actor like moves in next door, and he's like this super famous actor. So she is like watching him over the fence and like kind of spying on him because she's intrigued with him. And then eventually she ends up getting more involved in that. I don't know like if what I would say is a spoiler, so I'm not going to like say why specifically they like first cross paths, but like it's not a good first meeting. And so from there it's kind of like a hate relationship developing into a
like enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
Have that trope in it.
Yeah. I just thought it was like a more interesting storyline, so I liked it more than To Love, Jason Thorne.
Okay, the next book that I read I also don't have with me, but I lent it out to Maggie. It's Good Girl, Bad Blood, and it is the second book in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Megan read that at the end of last year, I think, so you can kind of jump in whenever you want to. But basically, we follow Pip, and it's kind of picking up at the end of where the first book left off. And she ended up publishing a podcast called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder relating to the case in the first book, and that's gained a lot of steam. And now there's a secondary mystery where Pip's friend's brother goes missing, and she's asked by her friend and her friend's mom to come in and try and help solve the case because the police won't take it seriously since he's technically an adult, and they're like, oh, he's not missing, he's just like, he went away. So Pip tries to come in, and she like is posting updates on her podcast to try and gain some popularity to like...
Some attention.
Yeah, some attention. I was like popularity. Some attention to the case to see if people can help out, and it's just following the entire journey of them solving the case. I thought it was a really well done mystery and has a nice plot twist at the end, so I'm excited to read As Good as Dead, which is the last book.
That's actually the next book
I think
I'm going to talk about.
rating-wise, I gave that 4 out of 5 stars.
So this is the last book in that series, and it's called As Good as Dead, and it's a thicker one. It's not that long. It's like 450 pages, but I ended up giving this 5 stars, even though I wasn't typically like, I was kind of like not sure to give it 5 stars because usually when I'm like 5 stars, I need my book to be like, I need the book to wow me. But this one kind of like when I thought about how everything in the whole entire series like came together perfectly in this book, and this book had like, it wrapped everything up and made everything from all the other parts of the series make sense as to why everything is happening in this little town, because you're kind of like, okay, this many cases happening in this little town, like what's going on? This makes it make sense. It's a different case than the other 2 books. I felt like more of like a thriller aspect and like a scary component to this book too, which was different from the other 2 books. So there was definitely parts of this book where I was kind of frustrated and the plot wasn't going exactly how I wanted it to, but I think overall it was a good wrap up in the series. So I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars.
The next book that I read is Misery by Stephen King. This is my first Stephen King novel, and so I have mixed feelings about this book. I was looking for sort of a horror thriller kind of vibe, which obviously Stephen King is very known for. But this one just like, it's about an author. His name is Paul Sheldon. He gets in a car accident and he is picked up by someone in that town and taken to her house, and she is also a fan of his book. And the reason it's called Misery is because Misery is the name of a main character in a series of books that he's written, but he most recently killed off Misery within the series and like wanted to end the series because he kind of hated it, and he hated how like that series was like all he was known for because he felt like he wrote better books, but everyone was like, oh my god, like your Misery books are so good. So he killed off that character, and the woman who picked him up to like nurse him back to health, but like she's doing a really crappy job about it because like his legs are all broken and stuff. And he's like tied to the bed and stuff, like he's basically being held prisoner, and she's like, you need to like rewrite like the Misery book, like she didn't die, you need to rewrite it. And she's basically like, oh, like you do that and like I'll nurse you back to health and like eventually like I'll let you go. And this book just kind of like follows his journey like through captivity, kind of like shows snippets of him like writing the new Misery book. And yeah, that's kind of all I want to say about that because I don't want to give any spoilers, but I will say the reason I thought it was kind of slow paced was because it is just like he's in this house and like it just is following his life, so it's like nothing crazy happens, but there's a few crazy things that happen, but like they're really like gross. Like the way Stephen King can like write something to actually like repulse you is like, ooh, yikes. But I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, so I did enjoy it. It just wasn't necessarily what I was expecting when I was picking up a thriller horror book.
The next book that I am going to talk about is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and Sierra also read this. I don't know if it was this year or
It was
not,
last year.
This is very similar vibes to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Sierra liked to describe it as that kind of plot line, but with like inheritance games vibes, because it's taking place at this prep school that no one knows a lot about, and there was a crime that happened at this prep school. So there's also kind of like small flashbacks to like 1936, which is when the original crime and kidnapping happened at the Ellingham Academy, and then it flashes back to Stevie and like modern day her getting into the academy. She's like super interested in the crime, and like she applied to the school and got in because she like knew a lot about the crime.
Because everyone who like applies to that school and gets in, they have like this certain thing that they do. So like some of them are actors, some of them are writers, some of them are artists, or like some of them are really good engineers. And she was like let in specifically because she like knows a lot about the Ellingham case and like what happened at that school and like related to the family that opened the school.
So in this one, there is another murder that takes place in this book, and so it kind of talks about the previous crime, but then it also doesn't really wrap that up in this book because that's what the whole series is for. It takes you through the case, you kind of see what the character's thinking, and Stevie's trying to solve it, but you really end on like a cliffhanger and don't get any resolution in this book. But it was enjoyable. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. When I first started reading it, I don't know why, but I just like thought I wasn't going to find it that interesting because the first
I literally,
when I was reading it, I just like don't have like the right vibes in this book, but then they develop.
When I was reading it, I specifically remember thinking like the first like quarter to first half is like relatively slow and a lot of like background info, but then like the second half picks up, and then you're kind of wondering like how's this going to wrap up. It doesn't really wrap up.
There's also like more character development. Like the first half of the book, there's a lot of characters, so I was like just trying to keep the characters straight too. And now that I actually kind of like have the characters down, I think it makes the actual story better.
A little bit of romance, so that's, you know, fun to have.
Yeah,
and
just a little bit.
Yeah. Next book. You want to just go to that one since we're already on that topic.
Okay. Next one I'm reading now
is The Vanishing Stair. So I have read that one, and I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars, and I think this one I also gave 4 out of 5 stars. This one you finally do get some resolution. You get to like solve. I don't know if the case is fully solved because like this also has a cliffhanger a little bit, and so I don't know if the case is fully solved, but you do get some resolution in terms of like knowing
more stuff is
kind of what happened with like in terms of like the Ellingham, like the original case, you get like that kind of resolved, but then also like there's still the modern day cases going on where like there's been a murder in the first book that is kind of being solved in this one, and there's also like a student that's missing based off of the first book, and so Stevie's kind of trying to like figure out stuff related to like where's this missing girl, still like trying to figure out who killed the character in the first book, and she's also like now working with a professor who also like is at a local university, not related to like the Ellingham Academy, but at a different university, and that professor is like interested.
Ellingham Academy is technically high school.
Yeah, whatever. But the professor is like really interested in the Ellingham case as well, and so like she's kind of taking Stevie on like as this prodigy to help her get some like inside information. Since she goes to Ellingham Academy, she can kind of like look for some specific things that the professor's looking for, and it also like kind of ties into like the romance from the first book, but like they're kind of clashing because of a specific reason about like why Stevie's back at school, because she was brought back home by her parents because they didn't want her there like with the deaths and stuff going on. So yeah, still a cliffhanger on the end of that one. I feel like I can't like say too much about the books because like 1, Megan's still reading it, and 2,
no spoilers for them.
No spoilers. Yeah, exactly. Okay, the next book that I read was The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth.
I also read this year.
So this one, again, I'm always trying to find like
any book that I get that's supposed to be like a thriller mystery, I'm trying to get
I'm like
to
chasing the
live up
high
to the
of the silent patient. This one I thought was really good, really enjoyable. It's basically about the main character. Her name is Lucy, and she's married into this family where the mother-in-law is just not very welcoming to her, and she always has kind of hoped for a mother-in-law she can like be really close to. And I think because her mother died when she was younger, right?
I don't remember.
I think. So the mother-in-law's name is Diana, and it kind of like talks about how the relationship has never really been the best. And it opens with police coming to Lucy's house and saying, hey, like, is this, like, does Diana's son live here or something, aka Lucy's husband? And they find out that Diana's dead. And at first they think it's a suicide, but then they're like kind of finding out more details and like being questioned by police, not just like Lucy and her husband, but also her husband's sister and her husband. And everyone's being questioned about like how they may or may not have been involved in Diana's death.
And this book is written as like it goes back and forth between present, which is where the book starts, and when you find out
Lucy's point of view, and then past, which is Diana's point of view. So you get to like get some insight, even though Diana is dead. When you kind of like start the book, you get some insight into like her relationships and her way of thinking from like things in the past. And so it's a murder mystery.
I will say there was definitely like twists in here where like I was still like, oh, that was a good twist.
Yeah.
So it was a good book. I gave it a 4 out of 5.
I did as well.
I read one other book on my iPad, and it was Layla by Colleen Hoover, and that one is probably not one of her most highly rated books. It's probably still like high 3s or something. It's probably the most similar to Verity, which is the other kind of like psychological-ish thriller mystery book that Colleen Hoover has written. And Verity, it was like 5 out of 5 for me. This one, I think I gave a 4 out of 5. It was close to being a 3, so maybe like 3.5 is kind of like my true rating for it. The premise is that there is this guy who's a musician. He meets this girl that he's like working a wedding for, and she's like one of the bridesmaids. And so they hit it off, and then they become like inseparable. At that point, they're like made for each other, love of their life type thing. And so she goes back to be with him, but he's also like kind of like working on building up his music career and becoming more famous because he doesn't have like a huge following yet. And then Layla gets involved in this like accident. So she kind of is like a little different, and he's trying to be very supportive and helpful. So he thinks it'd be super great for him to take her back to this like bed and breakfast that they like first met at. And kind of like see if they can build back the relationship that they had. And while he's there, he starts experiencing like these paranormal experiences, and then he starts like being able to communicate with the ghost. And so I feel like that's enough of a glimpse into the book to get it going and kind of let you know what it's about, because then everything else from there is kind of like the plot.
Okay, the next book that I have is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This one was just a fun, lighthearted murder mystery. It's kind of like, not like the same vibes as like Monk the TV show, but like in the sense of like, it's just, there's like a group, it's like at a nursing home, and so it's a bunch of old people, and 4 of them form this like Thursday Murder Club where like they get together and like try and like solve these like tabletop mysteries of like, originally one of the members of the Thursday Murder Club, who is now like in dementia care or something, like she used to be a detective, I think, and so she'd like bring in old like case stuff for like all of them to kind of like work together and solve. And then like she obviously like is kind of out of the group because she's in like the dementia unit, so they bring in this other character who's kind of like the main character. We get little like diary entries from her, and it follows like a real life case because someone related to like their nursing home is murdered, and so they're like, well, we can just try and solve like this one right in front of us. The character's a lot of fun. It's like an actual mystery that you can kind of like follow along with, but not necessarily predict in any certain way. And I think at the like very end, it does a really nice job of like tying everything together, because like there was literally like the moment, I won't give actually any spoilers because I'd like want you to like experience it for yourself, because Megan's still gonna read it, but it kind of like connects everything at the end. And there's a lot of good one-liners in this book. Like I'd like read it and then like chuckle to myself. So it was good. I could see myself getting the next book in a series, which is I think The Man That Died Twice, or The Man Who Died Twice.
All right. I also recently read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey.
I also read this one this year.
This is a good old romance.
This one I gave 4 out of 5, if I did not say.
This is just a good old romance. I decided to read this after having not read romance for like 1 or 2 books, which since romance is like my favorite genre, when I get back to it, I'm like sucked in.
Yes.
So I read this one within like 24 hours. So the main character is kind of this heiress that does not have a whole lot of responsibility. She's never been in a serious relationship. Money is no object to her, and she's kind of like the life of the party. And so she goes through a breakup right at the beginning with someone that she's only been with for like 3 weeks, and he's like, you're stupid, like you have like no personality at all. And so she gets upset by that, and she decides that she's going to go break into a hotel and like have this pool party with like a lot of people there. So she does that. She gets in trouble. Her stepdad decides to say, time you learn a lesson, and he sends her off to this like seaport town because her dad that died when she was younger is from there, and like so her mom is too, but her mom like never really told them about their past at all. She's a sister too that comes with her because she's like, I want to be nice and like help you acclimate. So she sends her off there, and they decide like, okay, they have to stay there for 3 months just to like learn a lesson, and like they had a certain amount of money, and then it was kind of like, okay, fend for yourselves once you're there. So they decide to start, their dad left a bar in their name, and so they decide that's where they show up. There's a bunch of people there because that's kind of like the local hangout, but like it's not really an established place. And so that's where they're staying. That's where they decide, or like that's where they also meet these people that they meet at the town for the first time. Like they don't really make a great first impression. Brendan, I don't know if he works there per se, but he kind of like, he doesn't work there. But they all kind of like, it's just like no one really is in charge there. So he didn't really have like fond thoughts of like these two privileged girls walking into the bar and like claiming the bar as their own. So they got off on the wrong foot, but then their relationship blossoms from there. The girls develop, you know, deeper understanding and appreciation of the building and the town that their dad's from, and they get to know their dad and stories about him from people in the town, and it's a good story. So
yeah, I gave this one 4 out of 5. I think if we didn't say that. I'm really looking forward to the sequel, I guess, but it's going to follow her sister and another one of the guys that's also in this book, so I'm very excited for that one to come out. I think that's hook, line, and sinker. But yeah, this one was really fun, lighthearted to read. It's one of those ones where you like start it and you're like, this is gonna be fun and enjoyable, and then like it's just an easy 4 out of 5.
I will say for this one, there's like some books where I read, and I was worried that in the beginning of reading this book, it was going to be like this airheaded girl who like had no personality and like didn't care about anything, and that always worries me in books because I'm just like, I hope the girl has like more traits that are like appreciable besides like just being pretty. And so it starts off that way where she's kind of like this airhead and doesn't have like a whole lot of like stuff going on up here, and then you realize like she actually just like has never been put in a situation where she's been forced to like think and fend for herself, and then once she like grows into that, so she actually does become like a decently good likable character. So
on the other hand, next book that I read this year was 99% Mine by Sally Thorne.
I also read this book.
So Sally Thorne is also the author of The Hating Game, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I'm aware The Hating Game had like a ton of cliches, but I still like really enjoyed it, which is why I gave it a 5 out of 5. This one I definitely had heard like poor reviews, but Megan bought it, and I have a rule in our apartment where if there's a book here, I will try and read it before I go and buy new books. And so I kind of went into this honestly like not expecting to like it, and I really like didn't like it that much. I gave it a 3 out of 5 because it's like it is a romance, so it's like, you know,
I read it pretty fast.
Fun and lighthearted.
I also gave it a 3.
But the thing is, this main character is just like so annoying and like not very likable. And so basically, to give you some background, the main character, her name is Darcy Barrett, and she's a twin. She's a twin brother, and they also have this neighbor boy. His name is Tom Valeska, and when they were younger, like they all grew up around each other, and then like I guess like it makes like no sense. Like she has like heart problems, and so she like wants to go and like travel the world, I guess. So like, that's what she had been doing, like kind of like before like we first meet her, I guess. And
she comes back because their grandma had died, and now they needed to like take care of her house and figure out what to do with it. So their plan is, okay, let's fix it up. This Tom Valeska guy luckily owns a construction company, so they're like, perfect, you'll fix it up, and Darcy's gonna oversee it because she's there, and I'm like, the brother is working in like New York or something.
And like the brother is just furious at Darcy because they got into a fight about like something he wanted to sell the house, but then like she didn't want to sell it. So Darcy has like this crush on Tom, like you learn that pretty early on, because she's like, oh my god, like he's the only perfect guy I've ever met. Every guy that I like have been with since him, I've always like compared him to. And so obviously like during this 3-month renovation, she's like, how am I supposed to like not fall in love with him?
Because she's planning to immediately like start traveling the world again and be a nomad.
Yeah. And her brother's also like, you can't fall in love with Tom. Like, I know it's so obvious that you like him. And so basically during the renovation, they interact. They may or may not start to like each other. The reason I'm so mixed is because I feel like there's a lot of random plot lines that like didn't make sense. I thought she was weird.
Yeah,
and
like, just like the things that she would say, and like, I get quirky, but like some of the stuff in this book was just like weird.
Beyond quirky. Like, this is not related to the plot at all, but she like keeps describing him as a wolf. I was like, what? So yeah, it was okay, but if you haven't read it, don't bother. The Queen herself has arrived. Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. Just came out this year. 5 out of 5 stars.
This was one of my favorite Colleen Hoover books I've ever read. Yeah. I would say it was top 2. My favorite might still be Ugly Love, but I could reread both probably and like do a direct comparison. But this is an easy 5 out of 5. I could tell from like the moment I started reading it, I was like, I'm going to like this book and it's going to be enjoyable the entire way through, and it really was.
So basically the premise of this story is our main female protagonist, her name is Kenna, and our main male protagonist, his name is Ledger. We don't have a lot of information right off the bat. We just know that she's been in jail for like roughly 5 years for something related to her previous boyfriend, and she's trying to get out of prison. She wants to be in her daughter's life. Her daughter's about 5 years old and being taken care of by her boyfriend's parents. And so she knows that his parents aren't going to want to let her be in her daughter's life because of what happened to her boyfriend. And so she moves to the town, like, having pretty much nothing, at, like, this very, like, rundown apartment, just trying to, like, make ends meet, like, wherever she can. And so she's, like, trying to make money. And she goes to this bar and sees the guy who owns the bar, or, like, he works there, but he owns it, too. And his name is Ledger, and she's like, oh, he's cute. So I don't want to say the importance of who Ledger is.
You realize he's involved in more than just being, like, the guy she's interested in for a relationship, so...
Yeah. And so we kind of switch POVs between Kenna and Ledger, of, like, Kenna trying to figure out how she's going to end up in her daughter's life, but also, like, realizing that things that she's involved in with Ledger would jeopardize that, and Ledger himself is realizing, like, oh, like, I shouldn't get involved with Kenna, but I also really like her, and so it kind of, like, has this back and forth of, like, them both wanting a relationship, but, like, knowing that they can't have it. And so I feel like that's all we can say about it. But yeah, loved this book. So good. So I'm going to just finish off with the book that I'm reading now because I think I will finish it by the end of February. And I'm reading Regretting You by Colleen Hoover on my Kindle. This is basically just like two different POVs of a mom and daughter, and something tragic happens in the beginning of the book, and the mom and daughter are both like separately trying to navigate like this grief that they're feeling, and each of them kind of like is staying in their own lane and like not really talking to each other, and so like they don't know like what each other is thinking. And there's a romance on the mom's side, romance on the daughter's side. I'm still reading it, so I don't even know all the details, but I am enjoying it so far. I think it'll be a 4 out of 5.
I listened to the audiobook of this last summer, but I also think it's a 4 out of 5, and it's a solid Colleen Hoover book. My book that I'm planning on reading next is on my iPad. I'm planning on reading Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. I literally couldn't even tell you the plot, like I have no idea, but I think it has a decent reading, so
I think it does too.
Hopefully it's good. Otherwise, I'm probably going to read Thursday Murder Club shortly, and then I think a trip to Barnes & Noble's in my future.
Oh, yes.
I want to get, one of the next books I want to read is Project Hail Mary because I've seen such good ratings on that book, and I think it'd be a good switch up from my
first
romance.
dip into sci-fi. So, hope you guys enjoy this book, and if you guys...
this book.
Oh. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more book videos from us. Let us know any specific ideas you have.
Otherwise, we will talk to you guys in our next video. Bye!